architectural work in the Chicago region with innovative public projects that reflect, respect, and celebrate the values of the communities that their designs serve. He received his B Arch from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. My alma mater. A program that included study at the École des Beaux-Arts in Versailles, France. He then joined Stanley Tigerman and Associates in Chicago, where he became an associate before leaving in 1978 for Booth Hansen and Associates, where he was senior associate and vice president. In 1987, he founded a partnership which became David Woodhouse Architects in 1990. He was advanced to membership in the College of Fellows of the American Institute of Architects in 1999. And in 2007, David Woodhouse Architects received the AIA Chicago Firm of the Year Award before becoming Woodhouse Tinucci Architects in 2014, which brings in Mr. Andy Tinucci. Andy Tinucci received his BSAS from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign in 1995 and a B Arch degree from the University of Arizona in 2001. In 1996, Andy joined Rick Joy Architects in Tucson, Arizona, where he spent 6 years designing and building internationally published and award-winning architecture in the incredible landscapes of the desert Southwest. Nearly 20 years ago, I had the distinct pleasure of touring some of these amazing desert dwellings with Andy, and I recall standing in the doorway, and we all know the architectural significance of front doors. At that moment, in the blazing heat of Tucson, we're in between a carefully rammed earthen walls, keeping the indoor climate modulated to beautiful effect, and the tilted glass facade. And Andy and I had a long, detailed conversation about window gaskets. In 2002, he joined David Woodhouse Architects as a project architect for the Morton Arboretum Visitor Center, and 12 years later, he became partner of Woodhouse Tinucci Architects in 2014. He's married to an architect turned teacher, an amazing person. Andy has maintained his commitment to architectural education through his appointment as studio professor at IIT. As well, he's taught and engaged with numerous universities around the Midwest. On a personal level, I think about architecture in a different way because of the conversations and debates that I had with Andy when we were in school. Architecture is about relations. The takeaway here: pay attention to your classmates at all levels. Andy was an undergraduate while I was a graduate, and it didn't matter. We were both chasing the architecture muse and amusing ourselves at the same time. These conversations with Andy mattered to me, and they helped deepen my own values. Speaking of values, Woodhouse Tinucci has a strong set of values. Number one, architecture matters. It shapes both act and thought. It embodies our deepest feelings and our highest ideas. It's bricks and mortar. It is poetry and metaphor. It relates us to people, place, and time. Number two, proven pathways lead to new ideas. They create value, ideas that work by weaving their clients' needs with fundamental elements of materials, space, light, structure, and order. Each realized project becomes an authentic, exceptional expression of who the clients are and what they do. Number three, value is a result of values. Number four, they make to communicate. The process of making is essential to their practice of architecture. Whether through a model, a drawing, a building, they shape space to communicate with their clients, their collaborators, and their audiences. Number five, building that lasts. We believe that only architecture and thoughtful simplicity and authentic experience is truly sustainable. Sustainable because it matters. This commitment to environmentally responsible design is fundamental to their process. And lastly, everyone holds part of the answer, and this gets to the collaboration part. Our approach to teamwork shapes and successes of our work more than any preconceived architectural idea or theory. Collaboration in every step of the process is at the heart of what they do. By exploiting a broader network of professionals and experts, they're able to assemble the most talented and appropriate teams for every project, resulting in the most imaginative, cost-effective, and comprehensively integrated solution for each project. Please join me in welcoming David Woodhouse and Andy Tinucci. To the Ball State University College of Architecture and Planning. They're going to tell us a little bit more about their values and their collaboration through their amazing work. Welcome.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, all of us, for having us. It's a great pleasure to be here. When Andrea called and asked us to I got a red light. I had a green light. I'll take that. Check that.
That's the best commercial. Whole thing, that's a lot louder.
So as I was saying, thank you, Kevin. Thanks for having us. We were really excited when Andrea called and asked us to join you and talk about collaboration. Because, of course, architecture is a collaborative practice. We have an office. There's 15 people. We collaborate all the time. But more so than that, David and I truly believe that the shape of any architectural practice dictates the aesthetic outcome more so than any idea, any individual, any genius. And think about what that means. That means that the act of having a practice, running a practice, is itself a design problem. And it's a design problem that we are challenged with every single day and are inspired with every single moment. We succeed and we fail, and just as we tell you in school, you learn the most through your failures. And it's really through this design problem that I had the incredible pleasure of meeting David and now working hand in hand with David and working and learning about architecture every single day. So the shape of our practice actually starts with our office. So our office is a singular room that is all based around one table down the middle. We're all equal. There's no hierarchy in our office. We all work at the exact same table in this one open room. When we moved offices in 2003, David searched the city, combed the city for a space just like this, one that would put us in direct contact with the natural environment around us. This is a tenet in our work, connecting people with natural materials and with natural light. You'll see this in all of our work, and working in this room is fundamental to it. So the shape of our practice inside of this room dictates the aesthetic outcome. Every day I look up at this ceiling and I'm blown away. And I saw it again walking down your stairwell. I looked up and there it was again. But it's just natural concrete, and you see its imperfections. And I don't know how resolute the picture is because it's just an iPhone photo. But you can actually see with concrete the memory. You can see chalk lines. You can see the red chalk line of the space that was there before us, and you can see the blue chalk line that we snapped when we installed the light fixtures. We're an office of makers, people who don't think about architecture only as drawings, but as physical objects in the world that we love to participate in the creation of. Our office space, because we were on a tight budget, was built by us. We're an office of architects who certainly enjoy taking finished photographs of our work, but we really appreciate the mess that is our work more so than those finished works. We really think that true success and the measure of success is people in the buildings, occupying the buildings, finding new ways to use the buildings, more so than we could have ever imagined. But of course, it's the making of experiences that we're really after. So when all these elements come together, they create incredible experiences that change with every single day, with every passing cloud, with every new addition to the office. Those experiences change. We're a process-based office. I still brag to everyone I can that I get to walk around with a sketchbook and pens in my pocket, and I get to draw every single day. We're incredibly observant. We look around us every day for what we can be inspired by in the world. We're always inspired and impressed by when materials act in ways that we didn't anticipate them to. We obviously try to think outside the box, but of course are often thinking inside of the box. To overcome the boxes sometimes, we explore ideas that we anticipate won't be built, but we think about higher potentials for architecture in the future, something we've enjoyed talking with you about today. And we also leave the box, that beautiful room that I mentioned, to get out and celebrate each other, because it's really, we're no better than the people we work with. So we celebrate each other and enjoy each other as much as we can. I've been in a lot of beautiful rooms across the world, but I'm really proud to be able to say that this room that I work in every day is one of my favorite rooms in the whole world. I go there every chance I can. I feel comfortable when I'm there. I don't always only work on architecture when I'm there. It's an extension of my home. It feels like my home. We're really lucky that we've been able to create this piece of architecture for ourselves that we practice out of.
I'm going to launch, can you hear me? I can't tell. I've got a green light. I'm going to launch a kind of a trip through a few of our projects, because ultimately we can say what we want, but to really believe it, you have to see it in work. So this is where you should be looking. The first project I'm going to show it was called the Divine Word Chapel. We built it for a Roman Catholic missionary order out in one of the northwest suburbs in Chicago. And it was a renovation, very small addition to an existing building, kind of a hodgepodge of existing buildings. This is the exterior. It's on a very busy highway. So one of the things we tried to do was to kind of play with road architecture a bit and tie into that highwayness to attract attention. It was kind of like a big drive-in movie screen. The priest that we work with, Father Krasnicki, Father K, we always called him, said that one day the Madonna's face would show on this screen. It hasn't happened yet, but it could. And it was sort of an attention grabber. Then inside, this is the plan. You entered over on the left-hand side there, and the idea is that you go through a visitor center and you see what the missionaries do around the world. They go out to New Guinea and all these kind of places and preach the word. They're very literal about the word. They preach the word. And then there's a moment of choice in the project where you have to decide what you've done, what you're going to do after you've seen this. Are you going to just go home? Are you going to go to the mall? Or are you going into the chapel to pray? And so the heart of it is the chapel itself. That's the round shape that you see there. And you come down through this, out of the visitor center. On the left-hand photograph is kind of your choice point. You can leave, or you can engage with the values that you've seen. If you do, you go on into the chapel. The chapel was never seen as a parish church or anything. It's just kind of a traveler's chapel. It's only, I think it's 18 feet in diameter. It's very small, very personal. It's just for sort of individual worship. What it is in fact is a stack of boards that completes almost an entire circle. What the Father K told us when we were working on it, he said he didn't want any kind of quotation of kind of ecclesiastic, no Gothic windows, nothing like that. Because the Catholic Church is Catholic with a small c. It's universal. It can go anywhere. It's cultureless. It's above culture. So we tried to use very, very basic things. And the very first time we showed him this, he said, "Oh my God, it's wonderful. It's like the huts we preach in." It's, you know, it had all sorts of memories to him. And what he taught us about it was he always said that the Bible teaches in parables. So what we really did is work with him, collaborated with him very closely to find out what those parables should be and to try to turn them into form. So here you see on the outside of the chapel, you know, life is, it's very tortured. It's very, you know, these are pine boards, all sort of skewed, sort of shimmed away from each other with stabbing boards of cherry. Inside of it, though, it's all serene. It smooths out. Once you get into the sacred place, it smooths out. It's surrounded by, you know, this was a renovation job. It was a very low budget, and we couldn't change much of the original building. So to change the windows and everything, we did what you see on the right-hand side there. We sanded plexiglass slabs and put them on frames to make the light translucent. It was all about the light. Father K was extremely explicit about the reality of the presence of God in that light. Going into the chapel, as you can see, it's much calmer. It's, you know, you're in the sacred space now, but you're surrounded by wood. He was getting into things like Christ was a carpenter. You know, the importance of craft, the importance of the dignity of craft, things like that we really tried to respond to architecturally. We took, for the ceiling, this is the dome of San Andrea della Valle in Rome. We took this dome and kind of abstracted it to make, we carved or cut plywood shapes out of it so that up there somewhere you can see, you know, a cherub with a wreath or something like that. But it's sort of are they clouds? Is it a tree? Is it a chapel? What really is it? It's all those things. And he developed sermons and stuff around this. He found it very, very useful to him. The thing is, though, that what I remember about this project was, as the architect, was it taught me something very, very important. And that is that a building, when you design a building, it's an exchange. It's part of a dialogue between, like you start the sentence and someone else finishes it, and that's the user. And so we had designed the chapel, these slots in the chapel wall to be like, you know, you could put palms through them on Palm Sunday, things like that. We'd seen that, but we hadn't seen how it was actually finished. And what happened was that Father K, he had an inaugural sermon about the chapel, about, you know, explicating all the parables. And he had it Xerox, and he placed it on, you know, multicolored paper, and he stacked them in there one day, you know, just left it. And he came in once, and he found that somebody had taken one and rolled it up and stuck it in one of the slots. And he looked at it, and he thought, you know, he wouldn't have said damn, but he, you know, maybe he said darn. He was very upset. But he said, somebody's screwed up the chapel. Somebody's ruined the chapel. And he went over to take it out, and he unrolled it, and somebody had written a prayer. It was a prayer because this guy was going to prison. He'd embezzled some money. He was praying to God that God take care of his children. And so what do you do with that? Well, you roll it up and you put it back. And it taught, and then like within a week, the wall was full. And it taught us that, you know, you launch your project, but what happens to it is completed by others. And at first I thought, well, I'm really stupid because I didn't see that. And then I kind of worked myself around to feeling, well, at least there's some hope. We did design something that actually people responded to. They engaged with it to the point where they could complete it, which was an important message. Because most of our work is public, and when you do that, that's a very, very important thing for public work. The second project there's an institution called the Morton Arboretum out in the west suburbs of Chicago. It's a big botanic garden which specializes in trees, not in flowers and stuff, but in trees. And we did a visitor center and various other things, various other buildings out there. And we kept this photograph on our desks all the time we were doing that, because it was a kind of an odd project for an architect, because the building shouldn't have been there. You know, the Arboretum is 4,000 acres of a museum of trees. People go there for a nature experience. They don't go there for the building. They don't go there to be indoors. They go there to be outdoors. There oughtn't to be a building, except they have programs that they, you know, bathrooms, food service, things like that. They need a building for it. So we kept this on our desk so that we would always be reminded that the purpose of the building was to explicate nature. It was to launch you into nature. Nature was the deal, not the building. So the building is it's at what they call their visitor core. And it's where all the main parking lot is. It's food service. There's a dining room, a gift store, all that kind of stuff, orientation space, offices, plant clinic, all sorts of things like that are in this building. And it's next to a lake that is a big feature there, and surrounded by other gardens. There's a maze garden, a children's garden, all sorts of stuff around it that it relates to. The plan is kind of, in itself, is really meaningless. You know, it doesn't compose in any way. What it does, what we were trying to do here, is we thought long and hard about how do you relate a building to nature. Well, we decided we didn't want to mimic nature. We didn't want to ape it. We wanted it to behave as nature behaves. And a natural object, you know, a mountain or something like that, it's not a perfectly composed thing. It's a kind of a kaleidoscopic experience. It's fragments. You know, it changes as you experience it. So that's how we designed the building. So it's you know, it's not a simple rectangle or anything like that. It's maybe, what is it, 360 feet long. It's a big, long, linear thing. It sits right next to the lake, surrounded by the gardens, as I said. It's kind of V-shaped on what's the upper left-hand side here. That's because you come from the parking lot, and the building is reaching out, kind of like two big arms to guide you to the building. It's collective, a funnel taking you to the building. When you get to the front of the building, it's pretty opaque. It's a combination of wood open screens, wood walls, and stone walls. These stones were all salvaged from a building that was a predecessor building that we tore down to build this building. So this is all salvaged material. The heart of it, though, is when you come to the entrance, you don't go in the building. The building is a gateway that takes you right out into the tree museum. The building is actually, you enter it to the left or to the right. If you go left, there's the restaurants and all that sort of stuff. If you go right, there's the rougher stuff. There's the sort of the plant clinic where you take plants and kids do art projects and that kind of stuff. Sort of messy side. And this, when you come through, then the building, the main piece of the building is really a big open porch. We just floated this big roof structure down there, kind of gently bowed, so you kind of, you know, wouldn't stay under it, so it pushes you out. And it's supported on these columns, kind of like tree trunks. That's the main piece of the building. And off of that come brise-soleils and all sorts of, you know, screening for the window. This all faces south. But it's all using, this is all using woods. The wood itself did not come from the Arboretum, but all of the species we used are represented in their collections. And this is the dining deck down at the lake end of it, you know, to play with the textures. And then lots of surfaces of it are glass, so that you know, it's clear glass, so it's gently reflective. It's not mirrored or anything like that. But it's all the entire building is natural material, so that it can weather naturally, weather gently, and all the metal is lead and stuff, so it just, you know, it'll patinate and become calm. We also tried to use the glass walls. This is the dining room of the building. It's a 350-person dining room. We used the walls to try to blend it into nature, how the horizon just kind of repeats itself right across the glass to sort of make it go away a bit, kind of be comfortable. All that glass is a mullionless glass system that Andy came up with that you know, puts, I think it's 140 feet long with no sticks in your way, just completely panoramic view out towards the lake. This is working your way in. The photograph on the left, we're still outside. The photograph on the right, we're inside, and it looks the same because it is the same. You know, you just happen to be indoors. This was done way before computers and stuff, so we still had things called pencils. You know, ask your parents; they'll show you what they are. So we did a lot of hand drawing, we did a lot of perspective studies and stuff like this to test views and test the space. This is the orientation space that leads, down to a sort of a sacred view to them of the lake at the end. This is the other side of the building. This is the right side of the building. This is the rougher side. This is a big multi-purpose room where it has blackout shades and all that stuff, so they can use it in any way they want. But it has rough concrete floors and things like that people can make a mess in here, and it's okay. And this is the front of the building. This is the more solid side, where it's sort of wooden boxes all floating under that big porch structure. And this is the dining room at night towards the lake. You can see how transparent it is. This is the view. This was the test to us. This is the view from the dining deck. Did it or did it not give you the experience that we were going for? Of the outside. The entire thing is meant to persuade you to go outside, encourage you to go outside.
So in 2014, we were given the opportunity by Northwestern University, just north of Chicago, to do their sailing center. It was a building replacing their existing sailing center building, just a small 5,000 square foot building that was prompted or made a requirement by these two other very large buildings that flanked it. To the left of it was a new parking garage and visitor center, and to the right was a new music building, which actually, the view from the music building to the city prompted the need for the existing sailing center, which was failing and old, to be replaced and moved to a new location. So our building is the small, low one in the middle. The sailing center, interestingly, isn't the first time we collaborated with Lake Michigan, but it's actually one of about 10 times we've done a project directly on the lake, which is an incredible natural resource. It really defines Chicago to many of us, though I think it gets a little bit less billing. It's obviously beautiful. It's horizontal. It can be peaceful, but it also can be incredibly aggressive. And just these last 2 years, it's amazing how the lake level has risen several feet in the last 2 years, and it's changing the shape of the beaches in Chicagoland. It's actually, very interestingly to me, I'm so used to seeing the lake, having kind of lived there for such a long time, that to see it in this higher state, it feels different. This amazing datum that exists several miles out on the horizon, it's actually a datum that exists much closer up. So the notion that you have to build a building on the shore of Lake Michigan is actually something you have to pay a bit of attention to. So criteria, we talk a lot about criteria as designers, and the building fit itself between all the criteria on the site. The squiggly blue line you see, that's the 100-year floodplain of Lake Michigan that FEMA decides that you have to keep the building behind. And you don't necessarily have to, but it's really quite a good idea, because today the beach looks quite different than it does in this picture 5 years ago. The lake level is considerably closer to the building, in some places only 10, 15 feet away from the building. So the Forum became these two low-slung boxes, allowing views from the two adjacent larger buildings and staying low, thinking about a building that might exist behind it at some point. We took the shed that was to house the boats and put it closer to the lake so that it would have this functional access. And then we used that building to protect the kind of glacier enclosure of the classroom and additional building beyond. It architecturally sort of demonstrates itself as such, as these two bars connected by a glass box. Away from the lake, up on the page, is a protected courtyard, so that as the wind is blowing off the lake, or if it's an aggressive lake day, you can collect out on the protected court side. But otherwise, you find yourself out on the lake side, so the kind of offset boxes create an additional courtyard to the southwest. Zooming in on the lake then became our inspiration for texture. So this kind of horizontality and the ripples and the way the light play off of it became this incredible exercise for us as we set forth to cast a concrete that would mimic the lake texture. So we played with different concrete mixes, and we played with different types of formwork to come up with a texture that would work for us in this instance. We didn't land on anything complex. We landed on something very simple. Board-formed concrete, which you've all seen plenty of. We took the pine boards, we actually sprayed them with water and left them on the beach to dry and warp. So they naturally warped on the beach, and then we used those boards in creating mock-ups to see this. That white Portland cement mixture we landed on with a kind of tan sand gave us a very warm, white, light concrete that looked great on the beach adjacent to the lake with this slightly rippling horizontal texture on the concrete. It changes in every different light condition. From every sort of different vantage point, you get to see a slightly different story. To the north, as I mentioned, is that protected courtyard. This is the entry. You enter towards that glass box. You can see the large new visitor center in the distance. Benches, lighting create a really beautiful, peaceful environment there through all times of the day. The garage doors open to both sides so that from that courtyard you can get a view all the way through the building to the lake. Just inside the front door, again, the kind of horizontality of the concrete gives way to these views and that horizontality of the lake. This is the front reception here where the administration of the building takes place. You can administer both boxes from this central point. Turning slightly around towards the southwest, the reason I love to show this picture is because of the variations in textures. So not only was this building kind of monolithic and singular in its concreteness, but we pay close attention to the other various textures that you find in the building. So just in this one scene, it's nice to say the building is one material, concrete. But it's also nice to show the granite stone sets that highlight that kind of don't come into this pane of glass that might otherwise be seen as the front door, stop short. And the wood textures just outside that demonstrate the kind of boardwalk, a place where you're to sort of wash off your feet when you come off the beach. Here's an image of that classroom space where they'd give all their lessons and teach the classes. They run all kinds of programs out of this building. Their own sailing team runs out of this building, but then they offer sailing classes out of this building to the general registrar, as well as offering tons of camps. So here's inside of that large bar that is the storage building looking out on the lake. It becomes incredibly utilitarian. That view that I mentioned all the way through, looking from the beach all the way to that inner courtyard with both sets of doors open. And then just the way that it just blends in and is incredibly quiet on the site, something that I think that Northwestern was deeply interested in, the way that the beach takes precedence, the boats take precedence, the people and activity take precedence.
This is another one of the beach projects that we've done. This is a much more urban project. It's an urban piece of the beach. This is on the extreme south side of Chicago. It's down at like 72nd Street, I think it is, if you know the layout of the city. This was built. It's called Rainbow Beach. It's surrounded by a giant, very, very vibrant African American neighborhood. It's named for the Rainbow Division of the African American Division in World War II. And it's very unusual for Chicago because it's rotated 45 degrees from the city grid. There's a big piece of the city that's canted, and it gives a spectacular view of downtown across the water. And it's located in a great big park. We did a field house here. There was at some point they think they're going to build a natatorium in that big circle, but I hope they don't because we did the circle as a kind of a big outdoor lawn that they use for performances and stuff like that. But the beach building is down here in the lower right-hand corner, and it's a very, very simple building. You know, we do a lot of buildings like this where we're conscious that if you build in a park, every square foot you build is taken away from green. So every square foot is a loss of parkland. And so we always try to make the buildings as small as possible. What's in them is very, very simple. It's just bathrooms, you know, changing rooms, bathrooms. There's a concession stand, and there's a lifeguard's office, lifeguard's sort of station. So the thing is, it's not so much what's in the building, it's what's around it. And so we always try to shape exterior space with what's a very, very small object and has to stand up to a very, very large landscape. And the Lake Michigan horizon is pretty big. So what we did is we kind of came up with two different languages here. One is the solids, the two blocks. We arranged them to form a gateway to the lake. This is a civic gateway. And then the rest of it is a sort of a pergola system of translucent sunshades that we came up with to provide some shading. This is the right in the gateway between the two blocks of the buildings. You can see the skyline far off, and it must be 7 or 8 miles away, off to the north. And all the metal work is, it's steel, but it's galvanized, so it's sort of silvery. And then the pergola system, part of it is traditional pergolas made out of steel. And the rest of it, though, is these translucent sort of lollipops. I don't know what you'd call them. This big round, big discs, sort of canted discs. What we were trying to do here is for a neighborhood that desperately needs some kind of amenity. And in Chicago language, the lake is like that amenity. And it mostly belongs to rich people who can live in gigantic, towers along the lake. This is one of the places where the rest of us get to come. This is a place for a pretty disadvantaged neighborhood to come and experience the lake like everybody else. And so we were trying to distill that lake experience. We were trying to capture, the sparkle of water and bubbles and somebody once compared the discs to flip-up sunglasses and that sort of sense of sun and sand that you get. So they're all sort of shining in the sun, kind of like driftwood, kind of like silvered driftwood. And they form kind of translucent shaded areas on each end of the building, or in the center as well. And the building itself, because of the pergolas, becomes a sort of a sun demonstrator. It's there to register the sun. I mean, it's like a clock. You can stand there, sit there, and actually watch the stripes move across the building. It demonstrates what the sun does to you. This is the other end of the building. This is the lifeguards end. They wanted a private kind of place to hang out. And then they form these social areas, and it's always really heartwarming to us that we go to there's the professional photograph, right? This is just somebody took a photograph and sent it to us of what she saw the days she was there. And people are actually using it, they're enjoying it, they seem to be enjoying it. It's actually brought people to the lake and extended their stay. And we were there one day and we saw these kids doing this, and it was really striking. They were kind of doing what the building was doing. They're kind of jumping around and misbehaving, kind of playing. So kind of responding in a way.
Then bouncing back up to the north side of the city again, to another northern suburb. At Rosewood Park in Highland Park, probably about 25 miles north of Chicago, we just finished a project a couple years ago where we restored the entire beach. Really incredible project that involved coordination with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to pull out 50-year-old steel groins, those corrugated steel sheets that go out into the lake, and replace them with rock structures to create swimming coves. When David and I first went there, as we often do with projects, we just sat for a while. We just stood and observed. And it was an incredibly narrow beach. You can see it doesn't look to be a particularly lovely beach. You can see the steel groins, but really at places, the beach from the toe of the bluff and to the right, you can see the ground start to elevate to a 40-foot high upper park. Maybe it was only 50, 60 feet wide, so really incredibly narrow. And we sat and we watched people walk by heading south. And then we sat and we watched, and we would watch those same people walk by again south, as though they had come from out of nowhere. They had gone away and come from out of nowhere. So we kind of started along their path, and we discovered this incredible trail that led down the beach and then wandered up the ravine through these kind of stone mazes and stone canyons up to the upper park and around, and then back down through another ravine. I mean, the beach, which was lovely, this incredible interaction with the lake, was actually this incredible network of pathways that connected this upper and lower park. So our concept became simple, that the project should be episodic, like the park itself. The experience of the building should be episodic. We saw the building then as a series of experiences, sequences, experiences, transitions, thresholds. Interestingly, we were the second architect to this project. There had been an architect prior who had designed a building that had failed. We then came to the project and we had these observations, and it became totally obvious to us how we were going to make this project work for the community. So we drew these sketches. This would be the experience, this kind of episodic series of materialities and textures, these experiences of a boardwalk, not a building. David said we do a lot of projects where there ought not be buildings, and it's true. There really shouldn't be a building here. There just should be beach and lake. But there needs to be these services. So instead of a building, we conceived a boardwalk. Instead of a building that was a singular object, we conceived that object broken into pieces and stretched taut, pushed way up against the toe of the bluff so that you couldn't see the building. A plan that initially was like this and transformed through the way into something that's pretty close to this today. Those episodes as seen in sections, buildings, enclosures, benches, viewing, play, food. Here's Don. Here's Don who he's the one who took that initial building designed by that original architect and said, no way, we're not going to have that building. That building is like me taking this table right now and putting it up in front of the screen for you all to see. Nothing. So the original architect, the previous architect, designed a building, a 3,000 square foot building, which is what the program was, and put it right in front of the lake, right at the end of the parking lot, just like any not so good architect would do. And it was very easy for Don and his group to really hate that building and make it not work. So we came in and we had this concept. We understood exactly what Don and his neighbors' concerns were. And we designed a building that everybody could get behind. We built that confidence through this collaboration with this public group of people who were not in support of this building at all. And when we did that, when we satisfied every one of their concerns about the design of this building, it turns out that really what Don didn't want was just people and the noise from the beach down below his house, which was up on the bluff. And the minute it became clear that that's what Don didn't want, the whole rest of the community was able to get behind this building and get this building built. And really amazingly, at the end of it, we were there, and I don't have a picture of this. I wish I had a picture of this. But we were there on site, and there was Don. Don came up to David and said, I can't believe how beautifully this turned out. Thank you so much for this project on the beach.
He said, if you ever need a reference, have him call me. Yeah.
Thanks, Don.
Thanks, Don.
It's an amazing site. As I mentioned, we transformed the beach. So tons and tons of sand was brought in. Those groins were pulled out from the lake. They built new beach structures into these swimming coves. Tons of sand was brought in to supplement the beach. The new design of the coves keeps the drift, the natural southern drift of the lake from stealing the sand away from it, and obviously keeping the bluff intact. And on a site like this, all you have to do is just take a building and open it up to the lake and the view, and you've got something miraculous. The boardwalk, not literally, but obviously, generally speaking, turns from an epay boardwalk into cedar-clad forms that shape space. So you can kind of see that continuous thread of wooden material enclosing or shaping those spaces by which program takes place. I remember when I was in Arizona being incredibly sensitive to the natural landscape and not to step on something that was going to take a long time to grow. And we still remain sensitive. You know, these buildings that shouldn't be there, they also shouldn't be there just because they're damaging to the environment and the ecosystem. So all the animals that were once there before with new construction have to find a new path, have to find a new habitat. And amazingly, the stories architects could tell from behind the lens of a professional photographer's camera are many, many of which the architects wouldn't want them to tell. But in this instance, it's amazing because at that moment, I remember being behind the camera and this deer walking up and just standing there. And standing there for a long enough period of time that at 5 in the morning or whatever the sun rises, we were able to actually get a beautiful picture of the deer in addition to a beautiful picture of the building. It makes you feel good. And then just those episodes. So really the story of this building, like a lot of our work, isn't told through that one canonical shot that graces the cover. It's more just through the episodes of experience and how those can be different, every day and through every hour. The natural materials just compose themselves again into these kind of features: benches, seats, picnic tables, pavilions, light vessels, framing devices. From up above, we paid as much attention as from down below. So the roofs, despite being just, rubber roofs that keep the water from entering the buildings, also get a deck over the top of them so that if you're up on the upper park looking out at the lake, you're not looking at a bunch of roof vents coming through the roof. You're looking just at that wooden surface fold over the building. Gracefully transitions into the evening where the light comes up. You don't see any light sources specifically, so there's no contrast. The stream opens up out to the lake, so at different rain events, the ravine washes out down to the lake and carves a new channel through the sand, which is always wonderful. And again, a picture of the lake. You can see it in all those different moments. Sunny, rainy, cloudy. We've recently started a new kind of shape of our practice in the form of a design-build firm. So in an effort to maintain involvement and continually be engaged with the construction and making process, we've started this design-build firm. Not as a business model. We always say our office is a practice model, not a business model. But as part of our practice model, really in support of just making more, better architecture. And in this one instance, we also had the incredible pleasure of working with the University of Chicago and the Department of Visual Arts and the students by teaching classes. So David and I and Amber Ginsberg, kind of in the center of this photo, the ceramics professor for the Department of Visual Arts, taught 4 elective classes at the University of Chicago, which does not have an architecture program. So it's just part of their Department of Visual Arts. We taught art electives about the making of a building, how to house a kiln, it was called. And we worked with the students, and they understood kind of scale, and they understood the scale of the kilns and the scale of the room that would be required by creating a bunch of diagrams and circulation diagrams. These are all things that you're familiar with. They started to think about fabricating this object, and how would we fabricate this object, and how would we eventually make this object. We landed on a shipping container, which isn't, otherworldly or anything brilliant. This is obviously something that's been done, but it was nice and it was a good solution because it was something that they could easily do in the form of an elective class. They didn't have to build heavy foundations. They didn't have to worry about structural elements that would put them at risk. So it was a really safe but really interesting way of using a building project as a vehicle for teaching and learning. We had a shipping container, a standard shipping container modified. It's directly adjacent to the Williams and Chen Logan Center on the University of Chicago campus, which was an incredible site. Out on this west side of the site, right where you see the container, there was an outdoor workspace, an outdoor art workspace that was really hardly ever used. So what's really interesting is this container, when placed on site, actually became kind of a physical manifestation of what the program of that space was supposed to be. We worked with the students to do as much as we could on the building. They poured the concrete for the walkways. We installed all the glass, painted, insulated, drywalled. to yield this totally simple, utterly transparent tube. This bump out was the students' idea, not our own. Really interesting. And working with them about how we would modify the shipping container, we just simply took one half of the container and we cut a hole in it and we just pushed it out the depths of the kilns, because you really only approach a kiln from the front or from the side. And we were able to just tuck it into place. It gets the kilns completely out of the way into that little niche so that you can use the whole rest of that tube for any other purpose, such as gallery or display. For the first architectural biennial in Chicago, we also had the opportunity to work with Atelier Bow Wow. A longtime friend, actually through a college roommate of mine, happens to be the director of the Graham Foundation, and she was curating the first architectural biennial, working with Atelier Bow Wow on this idea inspired by Piranesi's prison drawings. And she was there with Momoyo, and she called me up. I remember it was a weekend. She said, "Can you come to breakfast with us on Sunday morning? Because we have no idea how we're going to get this thing built in the courtyard of the Cultural Center." So we were able to collaborate with Atelier Bow Wow and Sarah Hurd of the Graham and the Biennial to find makers for this installation, this idea about kind of total access but no access. So this idea of being trapped in a courtyard, all about circulation and paths that you actually could never get to. You weren't actually to get out there onto those paths. You were just supposed to want to get out there onto those paths. We found a fabrication shop in town. We worked with Atelier Bow Wow to work on, in detail all the pieces as they would be built here or could be built here in a really short period of time. We used scenery makers to do it, which was fantastic. Because they have all kinds of different tricks for making things that don't actually need to support the weight of people but look like they do. Coordinated the installation. And to this day, it's here. One biennial later, it's still in place with not going anywhere soon. So it's almost as though it's become a permanent fixture at the Cultural Center.
We also do a fair amount of historical work, too. So we wanted to show you one of those projects. The interesting thing to me about, this project is a renovation of a theater that was built in the 1925 or so, about 4 miles out into the city from downtown. And there's a typology of theaters in Chicago. They were called neighborhood theaters. And they built, it was a vaudeville house. I mean, it has a full stage, it has an orchestra pit, all this stuff, and then they showed movies too. So, and it's wrapped in, 43 apartments or something, I think. So there's housing as part of it, and then also retail. And there are 2 surviving examples left in Chicago. This and the Uptown Theater, which is also being restored, I think, finally. So it's a great opportunity to bring back a kind of a beloved city or civic asset. And this is in a very, very exciting kind of growing neighborhood. It's become a very, very hot sort of gentrification is a big thing here. So it's kind of got a fight going on about that. But it's an opportunity to, what restoration really does is it raises the issue of, we can share this space with, it's the same space that they built in 1920, almost 100 years ago. We can share it in space, but we can't share it in time. We can't go back to that time. So it becomes sort of an exercise in playing with time, exploring time, about what is there now, what's happened to it over the last 100 years, what do we want to do with it? Well, what we want to do with it is turn it into a rock music venue. That's where the housing units now are not apartments, they're a boutique hotel, and all the retail is restaurants and bars. So that's kind of what we want to do with it. But it's bridging that time. And what we did to start to analyze that time was to collaborate with 2 really talented architectural photographers. And we sent them into the building for 2 or 3 days apiece, and just said, take whatever photographs that you see, show us the building. You go analyze it and show us what you see. And that's what a lot of these photographs are. This is what we discovered, is that it's, this is the lobby in here. The red up there is actually a glass ceiling that we can put back. It once went into the upper lobby. And you see the wear and the tear. That's one of the things that we want to keep in the thing. We don't want to return it. This is not the Paris Opera House. We don't want to return it to some gilded age. We want it to show its age. We want it to show its scars. Excuse me. This is the auditorium. The auditorium is covered by a giant dome. All the seats have been removed. Were removed by previous owners, so we don't have to worry about that. They say you can get 5,000 people in this room and have for rock concerts, but we're aiming at, what, 3,600?
Yeah.
I think it is.
A little more safe.
A little safer number than that. And then there's the balcony up there where the seats still remain. And we planned, see those arches in the back there, we plan to open up the tops of those arches so that we can get yet a third viewing platform back up behind them. It's kind of a VIP kind of area towards the stage. This is the balcony in those arches. And what we like about it is the fact that the seats are discolored. They're discolored, not uniformly. It's that sense of the passage of time and the thousands and thousands and thousands of people who have used this theater that is still there. This is the backstage area. All the stage roping is still there. We're going to keep all of that. And you find these amazing patterns of finishes. The one on the right is the marble in the lobby, but the one on the left is just like 100 years of peeling paint, and it looks pretty much like the marble. It's really, really a kind of a trove of that kind of stuff. It has a lot of ornament, terracotta and metal ornament in the theater itself. Then this is the backstage. I mean, it's got a very kind of Phantom of the Opera kind of feel to it. This is descending down below the building. This is some art project of one of the guys that worked in the boiler room. This is what he decorated his workspace with. These are the boiler rooms down underneath the theater. We're going to turn this into a bar, kind of a steampunk. It's sort of got a engine room in the Titanic kind of vibe going on. We see as a great place to get drunk, frankly. This is the lobby. The lobby is still intact. It's still dignified. It's still there. But it's interesting because it's not a refined building. It's a very utilitarian building. The railings there are just cast iron and things. It's got a kind of an honesty to it it's not frou-frou at all. And this is the plan. It's on Milwaukee Avenue, which is the diagonal here. The diagonal streets in Chicago are very, very unusual. If you've ever been over there, it's a totally gridded city, except every once in a while there's one of these big diagonals that goes out to a destination. So to have one of these lots, kind of with the diagonal is actually a kind of an unusual thing. Here you can see how it fits into its neighborhood. It's a little bit like the Arboretum building. The plan doesn't matter at all. It just fits together by function. And this is the cross section of it, where we're going to put back the big blade sign that used to be out there, and restore the lobby. That's the tall space on the right, and the entire auditorium under its dome on the left. And what we're going to do with it, as I said, is to turn it. It has been a rock venue for, I don't know, maybe 20 years now. Amazing people have performed here. The entire history of rock and roll has trooped through this room. And so we want to return it to this kind of state where this is what it's just the surrounding for that pandemonium, that excitement. This is the facade. This is an official Chicago landmark building, and we put it on the National Register. So all this renovation work has to be coordinated with the landmarks police in Springfield and down in the state capitol. So we have to work with them on all of this. And then what we're doing is we're finding all kinds of hidden spaces in it. There's a series of sort of open alleyways, area wells, kind of West Side Story feeling things that kind of go back through the building parts, which are now just, full of rats and garbage. But we're going to turn them into outdoor spaces. They're kind of found art, found spaces. We can exploit that.
We just actually are finishing up this project at the University of Chicago, another renovation of an existing building. This building, a 1960 Edward Durrell Stone building with a ton of adornment on a lot of the cast-in-place concrete. This is for the Harris School of Public Policy, a relatively new graduate school for the University of Chicago, who's just now getting their own building. Massive structure. Was built by, as I mentioned, Durrell Stone, 1960, as a conference center. So it's this massive block with almost like a hotel with rooms around the perimeter and teeny little windows. And then a few larger carved out conferencing spaces. That's the plan. That's not here. In the middle of it, that you can see in this old historic photo. So there was two large conferencing spaces that flanked. This was the lobby with one kind of elliptical shaped carve through the middle of the lobby. This became our inspiration for the project. We talked a little bit today about how times have changed. We had this project on our desks through the course of this project, Gordon Matta Clark. How could we take and carve and open up, peel away portions of the old to reveal new spaces on the interior, and not just physical spaces for programming, but also mental spaces, spaces for the connection of people and connecting over new ideas about public policy. Information is flowing so much faster today than it ever has, and the desire and need for a transparent flow of information is paramount. It's paramount in business school projects we're working on. It's paramount to our client here at the Harris School. So the idea was that information and people were going to flow in and out of this building, flow up and through this building, and at the same time, light was going to be able to come back down and through the building. So these sections and sketches that we did early on to conceive the project of this flow of people and space demonstrate the way it ultimately resolved. Like Matta Clark and building with models, we were thinking about carving, so we built kind of mass models that demonstrated the massive kind of solid nature of the building that we were going to start to carve all these spaces in and through. Some of those spaces that were getting carved out of the building we were going to drop back on top for one new programmatic space that was going to yield this incredible view of the campus to the north. That's a photo we don't have yet. So the project is really literally just opened in the last few weeks. So these are just the pictures that we've been taking as we go and see the space and see it in action. This is that carved atrium space, the juxtaposition of new and old, where you see the kind of concrete of the existing building with the new reinforcement and this new large forum space. This wood is all ash, reclaimed from ash trees that the emerald ash borer has taken down and will continue to take down. So reclaimed and milled by a local company in Chicago to create this forum space stepping down into the atrium. You can see the amount of natural light inside of it. We discovered as we carved through it all these incredibly huge structural elements that then become celebrated in the building as light reflectors or as thresholds. So you walk in directly underneath this massive concrete header into that forum space. You can see in the new plan here that kind of carving action demonstrated in the plan, inspired by the old and now realized in the new. A few construction photos. The flow of people and energy moving through the building is demonstrated by this kind of zigzag stair drawn in patinaed black, just black steel. Way up at the top of the atrium, kind of a very compressed floor plate. Another one of those concrete headers that light comes in and reflects off of down into the atrium. The new entry, we just carved and took off a few of these precast panels to create new, more transparent entry points to identify where those are. So at the front and at the side of the building, you can see that new glass box at the top here. The building collects all of its stormwater off of it into massive storage tanks that then produce all the gray water for the flushing of toilets in the building. It's a living building challenge, which is our first living building challenge project, which is like, what do you always say? It's LEED on steroids. Yeah, it's LEED on steroids. Okay, and the last project we'll close today with is a project that's just under construction. Probably a project we could spend a whole hour talking about just by itself. But the Robert Crown Community Center is kind of, to us, redefining the nature of what a community center could be in Evanston, this northern suburb of Chicago. We start with this image because it touches these 3 wards, so it's a highly charged political project in the city because of the nature of the demographics of these 3 wards. What is a community center? A community center can be anything. So we've actually gone to local elementary schools to talk about this project in these 3 wards. And we've asked students, what is a community center? And there's no better definition of a community center than what you see here on the wall. All these things can take place in a community center where we bring people together. And this particular program is incredibly complex. To 2 designers who haven't designed a building like this, it's quite challenging. 2 NHL-sized ice rinks, a public branch library, a preschool, a gymnasium, multi-purpose rooms. Those things don't naturally fit together perfectly. So it becomes a really challenging design project. And the thing for us is that, you know, we're this firm in Chicago, and we've stayed mostly local with our work. And this is a project typology that we're not super familiar with. Yes, we've worked on libraries. Yes, we've worked on preschools. Yes, we've worked on multi-purpose community centers, recreation centers. We'd never done ice pads before, and we'd never worked on a building that put this all together. So in terms of the shape of our practice and in terms of the shape of architecture, I think one of our current positions is that the way that we've always practiced is maybe not the best way to always practice. The notion that a singular firm just needs to grow or grab other firms into it to say that it has all this experience in the world and is awesome at designing ice rinks and recreation centers and schools and houses is maybe not how we should be working. So what we did to increase our agency is we went to Canada, where putting NHL ice rinks with preschools and libraries is something they do all across Canada, in fact. It's a totally normal building typology in Canada. And we reached out to our partners, MJMA, and we said, we'd like to work with you on this project, not as an architect of record and design architect, but as a singular architectural entity working on this project. You bringing your expertise, us bringing our expertise together, and deliver that to design this building. The site, and we won this project. We won this project over the biggest firms in Chicago and also over the biggest names of architecture firms in Chicago because of that approach, because of that understanding about this particular project. You see here the existing building. That building has a singular sheet of ice, not a public library, a small basketball court, and a preschool. So we're increasing the program on this site while maintaining all the other activity on the site. And it's really this active ground plane that becomes our concept for the site. We have to keep the existing building in operation, build the new building, take the old building down, get into operation, take the old building down, and then finish the entirety of the park and fields. 15 acres. So here we are in Canada with MJMA, doing what architects do, working, drawing this very complex project, trying to figure out how to take all these pieces and put them together. To give as much room as possible to the ground plane, this inspiration, this highly active and charged ground plane, we had to decide what was going to go upstairs. It's 130,000 square feet. You can't take a public library and bring it upstairs. No one will go to it. You won't take 2 sheets of ice and bring them upstairs because that's an awful lot of fill. But the gymnasium we thought people would go to. So we took the 13,000 square foot gymnasium and the associated spaces, the locker rooms, and we lofted it onto the 2nd floor to create a natural canopy and signify an entry point. We were thinking about connecting it to the environment and the world to bring as much natural light into this space. And our concept really became, in addition to this ground plane, connecting all the points of activity to one another. So from any point of activity, if you're on a soccer field, you can see people on the running track, you can see people in the library, you can see people in the ice rink. From the ice rink, you can see people in the library, you can see people in the gymnasium. We were really thinking about transparency in this regard to get all these activities connected together. And we were, in that vein, thinking about the Noli map of Rome and thinking about how to draw a plan that demonstrated the public space versus the not public space. And what's amazing about the drawing, of course, is that the entire site then becomes this one active public plane. The plans are fairly simple. The library to the south with the gymnasium on the right just over the top of it, and the two large sheets of ice, which technically take up about 2/3 of that square footage to the north, with the spine of programming on the first and second floor between them. Just inside the front door, again, this notion of transparency. The minute you walk in, you can see the library, which you can't see in this drawing on the left, and the arena in the distance. We had to draw these drawings to describe. It was easy for us to sit in public meetings and say, you're going to be able from the gym to see the library, but that the bouncing ball is not going to distract you in the library. But it was these drawings that we had to draw to really demonstrate how that would work, where you see the gym up in the top right, a window from the gym looking down into the library, and that thick kind of interstitial space that demonstrates all the sound attenuation we have to do between the gymnasium and the library to separate them. But the way that you can be in that library, see up to the gym, look straight ahead to the ice arena, or look out left to the reading garden, is the notion of all these spaces puzzling together in dimension. Obviously, the clear story then brings light in from up above, cascades down the west wall of the library. The arena, again, don't see many ice arenas in Chicagoland that have this natural light in them, so we fought hard to prove that none of the direct sun angles were going to touch the ice. We're using all kinds of special glass to diffuse the light, keep the UV rays off the light, and keep the heat transmittance at a minimum. You can see looking in the distance, the lobby in the distance, the library in the distance down low, and the gymnasium up high. Here's that gymnasium, lofted above, looking out onto the play fields. The kind of entirety of that active ground plane flowing underneath what is a light building, seen as a really light, actually masonry building, white brick building, that sort of just, in its enormity, sits as lightly as possible on the site. And we're just in construction, so all the steel is going up now. This was a drone photo from about 2 weeks ago, but we got foundations in before the worst of winter struck, and we're building now through this year, hopefully open at the end of this year. And with that, we thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Andy. We have time for a few questions if anyone wants to ask a burning question.
There's one in the back left.
One in the back, right here. Here, hang on.
Hi, I'm Stephanie. I was curious about your boardwalk project. This is my first year in CAP, so this could be something that I'm going to learn like a week from now or maybe a year from now or whatever. But it seemed that it had a lot of LA elements to it, and I was just curious if that was something you guys did within your firm, or if it was something that you reached out to in LA for, or how that worked.
We work really closely with landscape architects. It could be our most important collaboration point because we do so many buildings where landscape is the issue, you know. And we always, I mean, we were talking about this earlier with some of the landscape people, but we start with the landscape architect and work forward. It's not comes in later and puts parsley around the bottom of the building, because we don't really understand landscape in the same way, and as landscape architects do. And we need both of those viewpoints to come up with an integrated scheme for in and out. And it's kind of a little like the crown plan drawing. That's what we're aiming for in the end. We don't really know or care where the exterior wall is. We want it to be one fully integrated surface. Not flat necessarily, but And often view is extremely important about our buildings because the whole point of being on the beach or something is to see the lake. And you know, we need to work really, really, we need to get to the point where we and the landscape architect can finish each other's sentences. You know? So the selection of that person is very, very important. You know, we need somebody who's willing to pitch in and help, not just wait till the building's done and then do the land. You know, it has to be an intense. It ought to be one brain. You know? Did that answer? I don't know.
No, that's totally good. Thank you. Do you have, like, I know some of my friends, one of my friends is the CEO of a commercial development company in Indianapolis, and he has an architect firm that he tends to lean towards. He has an LA he tends to lean towards. Is there one that you guys can lean towards, or does it just depend on the project?
Yeah, it definitely depends on the project because just like architects, LAs have different interests and expertise and focus. So if you're doing an elaborate, ornate English garden on a residential project, we know exactly the person that we would love to collaborate with on that. If you're doing a highly architectural, gridded, Mondrian-esque painting type, that's the landscape architect. If you're working on, if stormwater is really a consideration, which it was at this Crown project, there are architecture firms who are landscape architecture firms who are specifically interested in stormwater management, rainwater gardens, really sensible ways of dealing with water on sites that we work with. So there's a variety of people that we love working with and collaborating with, and it just varies depending on what the project is. Yeah?
You had talked about you guys' model. You said you have like a practice model. Could you elaborate on that maybe a bit more?
Yeah, it's one of my stumps that I stand on. So architecture firms, there are many architecture firms that are shaped by their business model, which is to say, we're going to work on a type of project, and we have a fee for that project, and that fee represents a set number of hours that you have to work on that project, and we're going to drive in that direction, and we're going to be bound by that business model. Additionally, as you can see, we've done a lot of buildings on the lake. We've done a lot of park-type buildings. We could focus primarily on park-type buildings around the United States. We could focus primarily on that. And that would be a business model decision because we would fare well working on parkland buildings. We know parkland buildings. It's amazing when we set out to design a house. It's harder for us to design a house than it is for us to design a building in a park because we've just done so much of it. You know so many of the criteria right up front. That would be a business model approach. But I can't imagine working on only parkland buildings for the next decade. It sounds like I would get less and less and less good at working on parkland buildings if I kept repeating it over and over and over again. So what we're setting out to do is design the shape of our practice in the form of a practice model where practice is paramount. Practice is first. Getting better at being an architect, better architecture is paramount to us. So we use the term practice model. We are actively practicing being better architects.
I get what you're saying.
The
Thank
funny
you.
thing is that that's actually the business model. Obviously we're business. We need to make money. We need to pay our employees. All of that. We need security for ourselves. But what we really need is opportunity. And we believe that the best way to do it is to perform at the highest level at which we can do it, and then find people who that's what they want. They don't want some cookie cutter thing. They want some other idea. And so we are only as good as your last building. What could be a catastrophe for us is just some catastrophe building. I mean, how would we survive that? That becomes like, you did that? Oh, well, sorry. Talk to somebody else. That it is a business model in a way,
Sure.
but it's arrived at really from other. It's really a personal thing. I mean, it's like with everyone here. You're going to spend your life doing this. This needs to be worth your life. This needs to be really, really important because this, other than your families, is going to be the most important thing in your life. And so, it's where you get your satisfaction, your sense of who you are. It's also extremely impersonal, or personal, not impersonal. So it's kind of all those things.
Anyone else? All right. Thanks once again, Andy and David.
Thanks, Kevin. Thank you.